Hello again and welcome to this Bible study and short service. Still during lockdown because we're still stuck in that. So my greetings to you. I wish we could be in church but we can't. But it's even closer than it's ever been. So apologies that this is a little bit late because Bernadette and I were on holiday and we lost track of time, I'm afraid. And that's what we're thinking about tonight. It's time. It's waiting for God's timing, because this is part one of a two-part message about God's timing, waiting for God's timing. You know, many of us don't bring our plans to God in prayer as Christians, and we should. We really have to do that, bring our plans to God in prayer. And there's others that do bring their plans to God in prayer, but then they rush out and do whatever they think's most sensible thing under the circumstances, and they don't bother to wait for an answer. Now the Bible is full of incidents concerning people rushing on and not waiting for God's answer. And the saints of old, Christians of old, will tell you that you have to wait on the Lord. So once you've offered up your prayer, that's not the hard work over, that's just the hard work beginning. Because you need a lot of patience and you need to wait and wait for your answer. You need to look around for signs of an answer. You need to speak to people to see if the Lord sent the answer through them. You need to read the scriptures to see if God's going to speak to you through the scriptures and give you an answer that way. But don't rush on and not wait for the answer. You know, Abraham was promised a son, an offspring for him and Sarah. And he waited. And he waited and waited. 25 years Abraham waited. Now a lot of us would have given up by then. Sarah even tried to force God's hand. She tried to provide the answer. And that led to tragedy. And the thing is, her prayer of, "Give me a child, God, give me a child," suddenly it turns to, "Send this child away," as she sent Ishmael off into the desert. So she started praying for one thing, and quite soon she was praying for something completely opposite, because she hadn't waited for God. So a huge amount of patience needed, and we just commit ourselves into God's hands while we wait. Because if it's not God's time, you can't force it. And if it is God's time, you can't stop it. But when you pray and ask God to work, to do something, to provide something, to heal you, to heal your family, to heal that person closest to your heart and bring that person to church, praying for their salvation, you need to wait and see how God is going to work. Here's some stories from the scriptures. We'll start off with something from the New Testament, and we're 1 Timothy in chapter 3 in verse 15. 1 Timothy 3:15, and we see Paul writing to Timothy, and we read these words: "If I am delayed, you'll know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and the foundation of the truth." So Paul's writing to Timothy, he's writing in Ephesus. He can't get there. He's worried in case he's delayed. The theme of 1 Timothy is that The church has been planted in Ephesus, but there's people challenging the teachings and wanting to bring their own teachings in instead. Probably mixed with Greek or Roman gods, but they're basically providing their own theology. They're making up things that aren't true. And Paul's writing to Timothy and telling him to contend with the faith. In case I'm delayed, you know how people ought to conduct themselves, says Paul. And that would have given young Timothy the confidence to go on and stand up for the truth. So I don't know if that has happened since we haven't had our ministers and teachers. Is your church, are there people in there teaching error? I don't think there would be, because I think there's plenty of people in our churches, and if that happened, we'd soon put these teachers of error correct. Are you one of them? Do you know the scriptures enough, and do you have confidence enough to spot error and correct it? Publicly, maybe. Or privately first though, between you and that person. And then if they really are preaching and speaking and teaching error in your community, then maybe even publicly. So a different message. It's not impossible in these COVID days. So God's timing in this letter would have been perfect, and it would have given Timothy the confidence he needed to challenge others and to take a stand for the truth. I love Isaiah. Isaiah's model of waiting in the Old Testament. Isaiah in chapter 40, and we read these words in chapter 40. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. So, okay, we've prayed, we've put our hope in the Lord, and Isaiah says they'll renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. May we too wait for God and His answers, so that we too shall renew our strength, especially as we get older. You know, a touch from God, a boost from God, a word from God can really give us the energy and the faith and the hope and just the delight that we need in our lives. To hear from God after, perhaps for some of us, it's maybe been many years, and to see that prayer being answered. What a wonderful thing. Another prophet, Habakkuk. Habakkuk in the Old Testament. Let me see. It's just right there. And the word of God in Habakkuk says that waiting brings faith. And we read in chapter 2 and verse 3 to 4, and the Lord answered me, says Habakkuk, write the vision, make it plain upon tablets, so he may run who reads it. For the vision awaits its time. Still the vision awaits its time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it, and it will surely come. It will not delay. And when God gives us a vision of the future, maybe as healing us, maybe restoring a loved one to us, something that we're praying for, it will come. If God says He's going to do it, I have to check first that God says He's going to do that. And if He gives you the promise that He will do it, it will surely come. Even, says Habakkuk, if it seems slow, wait for it, and it will surely come. and it will not delay. Behold, he whose soul is not upright in him shall fail, but the righteous shall live by his faith. Now here's an amazing thing. A lot of people give up, perhaps because their soul isn't upright in them. Perhaps they're praying to God, wanting something for mixed motives. And the long waiting time can reveal that. And that person will fall away during the wait time. And then Habakkuk goes on to say at the end of this verse, in verse 4 in chapter 2, but the righteous shall live by his faith. Now there's something, because that's our Reformed Church's message. The just shall live by faith. The righteous shall live by his faith. And that's the basis of the New Testament, the new covenant between God and man. And Habakkuk, all these many hundreds of years ago before Christ, saw that. He saw that the righteous shall live by faith, not by keeping the law. But after you've prayed to God, the waiting game is what separates, if you pardon the expression, the men from the boys. This is the one that shows who's serious about their prayer to God, and those who haven't really maybe thought things through properly. So waiting for God's reliable word will reveal the truth. Amazing, because the just shall live by faith. And then we see in Galatians, in the New Testament, the timing of God in Galatians chapter 4. Galatians chapter 4, we're reading these words. But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law. Isn't that amazing? I think the Authorized Version puts it in the fullness of time. At the set time. Because God had planned to send Jesus Christ into the world. But when? What generation? Would it be when we were still little better than tribes and almost like cavemen, Bronze Age, Iron Age? Or would it not be nearer to the end of time in a modern age? Because with all our communications equipment, we could spread the gospel so much better. No, God chose. And God's timing, we understand, is perfect in answering prayer, in doing things. God chose to send his Son in quite an uncomfortable age. No modern conveniences. He was born in a stable, as we know. No electricity. No food. No supermarkets. No roads hardly. And that's when God chose to send Jesus into the world. What an amazing thing. God's timing in sending Jesus Christ, though, was exact. It was precise. We don't know why he came at that age, in that era, but we know that God's plan was perfect. Maybe if he came in our generation, in our day and age, his voice would be drowned out in the many other voices on radio and television and podcasts and downloads. There's so many voices in the world today. But there, in the fullness of time, Jesus Christ came. And the prayer of mankind was answered. God sent Jesus at the correct time in the history of the world. We'll do one more, and this will be the end of part 1. Solomon speaks of God's timing as well. So again, we're back right into the Old Testament again. Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. Solomon. And Solomon says, in Ecclesiastes in chapter 8, he says, because for every matter there's a time and a judgment. For every matter there's a time and a judgment. My computer keeps going to sleep. Everything, whether it's a piece of fruit or something else perhaps, has a time when it can be eaten. Before that it's too hard. After that it goes rotten. And it's the same with our relationships. There's a time to do things. There's a time to take our opportunity. There's a time which is the right time. Otherwise, if we go past that time, we miss our opportunity. We end up, as they say, bolting the stable door once the horse is gone, and it's too late. Too early is just as bad. There's a wrong time, many wrong times. And in our prayer life, we must live close to God, and He'll guide us into His perfect time for His answers to our prayers. Our times are in His hand. It's God who tunes our judgment and prompts us to act or wait, to apply for that job or to wait a few more months until we see how things are going to go. To move house, is it time right for prices? Or to wait, to stay put? And all our big decisions, we need to bring them before God. We need to listen to His answers and find His perfect timing, because He knows our needs and He'll answer our prayers. Thanks for listening, and I hope that you'll follow up and have a look at part 2 of waiting for God's timing. Thank you.